For those of you who have been sleep deprived enough to hallucinate, what was it like? In college, I tried to hold down a donut delivery job while taking a full credit load. I got up at 4:30 am to deliver, and often was up until midnight or even later. After a particularly busy week with almost no sleep, I hallucinated a man crossing the street right in front of me while delivering, and I slammed on my brakes to avoid hitting him. When I realized that there was no one in the crosswalk, and no one anywhere in sight, I finished my deliveries and immediately quit my job. I mourn for those who didn't receive their donuts the next day on time. I once spent 3 days without sleep. By the third day everything was in soft focus, colors were on, and I was hearing voices whispering my name. I do not recommend it. May I ask why you didn't sleep for so long? I was young, dumb and determined to burn the candle at both ends. It was 3 days of working, partying and video games. I'm too old for that nowadays. I love my bed too much. I was in Costa Rica patrolling the beaches every night to find sea turtles laying their eggs. It was a Rico vacation thing, so during the day we would be up and exploring the area. I don't know how they expected people to function on like 3 hours of sleep for a week, but we did it. I mostly remember super irrational thoughts. Thinking animal noises were people talking. Thinking monkeys were dogs up in the trees. But the hallucinations were crazy. I'm not sure if the beach really was glowing some, or if I was making all of it up. But my mind was making crazy glowing patterns in the sand. I thought the glowing stuff was also biting me. Really, it was sand fleas. We would stop and take a break mid-patrol. I'd lay down to rest and think I was still walking. Then wake up and keep walking. I got really confused as to when I was awake. For context, this happened during some military training. Laying down in the woods desperately trying to stay awake. Usually the plants turn into people. Like you'll see a figure walking around out in front of you, and then come to, and realize it was just a sapling or a bush or something. Happened surprisingly more during the day than the night. I had a similar experience during military training. It was really dark out, and I hadn't slept for at least 48 hours. I saw and heard several people crawling towards me in the bushes, and I thought it was part of the exercise as we were on guard duty, just laying in the mud watching the woods. I called out to them several times, and my sergeant even had to go into the bushes to convince me there was no one there. I had a meth problem several years ago. I think my longest stretch was 4 days. Past a certain point you just don't know which way is up. Sure, meth can make you weird, but in my experience I think the sleep deprivation is actually what makes you lose your marbles after long enough. When I made sure I slept and ate regularly, it was almost like an energy drink. But when I binged and had my junky weeks, oof. Once I thought I was hearing music playing loudly somewhere outside. I was convinced it was a soundtrack to a big music festival I had attended a few weeks before, that someone had also attended, and was now playing loudly in the middle of the night. The whole music's festival? Multiple bands had a soundtrack? Bruh. I couldn't hear it when I listened for it, but while distracted I could plainly hear it. Dead of the night, and no music was playing. Another time I was sketching in my room at like 3 am. I had a friend over who was just chilling with me, asking questions every so often that would lead to discussions. Slowly they responded less and less, until I looked at them, and they were just looking at me. Asked what was wrong, looked down, looked up waiting for the answer, and they were gone. Never there. They hadn't talked to me in months, after they found out I was using. So many shadow people, and those took a long time to go away after sobering up. Whispers, hearing someone talking to me, my name being called, hearing someone talking about me, even though I was by myself lol. Sometimes I'd be driving, and cars would suddenly be coming straight at me, lights blinding and everything, only to sort of come to, and realize I'm driving on a back road, and I'm the only car 4 miles. By no means am I saying any weird mental shit had nothing to do with the meth. But in my experience not sleeping 4 days had a much more horrifying effect. When I was in university, immediately after my father died, odd on Christmas Eve, after I threw him out, I pretty much quit sleeping. Maybe 3 to 4 hours a night. Went through lots of counseling, lots of medication, 7 different sedatives and SSRIs, but basically just couldn't sleep. We had a home birth for my niece, so even when the grief wasn't overwhelming, the newborn baby kept me up. Anyways, I knew it got bad when I started microsleeping. I'd be in class listening to a lecture, blink and police officers would be standing beside me explaining what had transpired, then blink and I'd be back listening to class. Maybe mentally be out of it for 5 to 10 seconds, but felt entirely lucid other than time dilation. The psychiatrist at the time said I was dropping into REM because I was so sleep deprived. Happens with new moms when babies are cluster feeding. I wasn't driving or anything, so not dangerous that way, but honestly lived in a fog for years. Just like snap of the finger, perfectly lucid horrible moment of my life, snap of the finger back. During this period I had a thing where I quit talking to people at school to see how long they would go without chatting to me. Literally had week stretches where not a word was said. Then came finals, started vomiting with anxiety when I tried to enter the exam rooms, which was an auto fail for my classes. So, academic probation, the opportunity to protest if I would speak in front of the university senate, which I clearly couldn't do, and eventual complete failure. There were times where I was hitting the student food bank after hours because I literally couldn't walk into a grocery store because my anxiety was so severe. So definitely can happen, but for me was pretty extreme situation. Very calm as far as hallucinations go. I had driven for 20 plus hours and was in the Arizona/California desert. It was the middle of the night. It had been dark for hours and only other car lights and stars were visible. Started seeing things out of the corner of my eyes, just kind of objects off a distance on the side of the road. Then it was things in the road ahead that got my attention. After a bit I started seeing fantastic meteor/light showers in the sky. Wasn't scary or anything. Didn't stop driving. To be young, dumb, and invincible again. I once went 106 hours without sleep, no drugs, not even caffeine. After 48 hours it was just to see how long I could go. Started seeing movement in my peripheral vision, like Freddy Krueger darting between aisles. I felt and heard my foot go through the floor. It didn't. When I went to sleep, I was out instantly. When I woke up it felt like the best 10 to 12 hours of sleep I ever had. I had only been asleep for about 2 hours. I stayed up for about another 20 hours because I felt so well rested. I'm no expert, but if my friend's bipolars are any indication, you might have been going through a manic phase. Not saying that you have bipolar or a similar condition, but if you weren't staying awake out of work, study or because you otherwise had to, just take note of the whole experience including your life outlook and things you remember doing. Then if anything remotely similar happens again, and you feel on top of the world, and make incredibly risky decisions, but that seem really sound like spending all your money on pretty things, or leaving your job to follow your newly discovered dream of writing a sea fantasy educational adventure book that you just came up with in your head, consider seeing a therapist. I used to have episodes of insomnia as a teenager. Once, while walking home from school, I saw a car driving in my direction. It suddenly veered onto the sidewalk, continued toward me, and swerved back onto the road moments before hitting me. I thought it was real, but I was so out of it from exhaustion that I didn't even flinch. I realized a few days later that the curb of the sidewalk was too high for a car to have possibly driven over. Do you still have insomnia, or is that something that can't be cured? Also, how are you coping with it now that you're older? To be honest, I don't know if I had legit insomnia, since I never went to a doctor or got a diagnosis. As far as I can tell, though, my sleep problems were anxiety related. My family was a bit abusive, and I think the stress was physically affecting me, since I had other health problems that magically cleared up once I moved out. It still takes me a while to fall asleep most nights, and any sort of light or noise makes it impossible to sleep at all, but it's nowhere near as bad as when I was a kid. It's more of an inconvenience than a real problem at this point. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.